Our daughter's wedding? It doesn't concern me. I've already made plans to travel with my adorable niece that day. We finally got the room we wanted. Traveling always comes first, right? On the day the family of my daughter's partner came, my husband suddenly canceled to see them when his niece called him, even though I had told him in advance. He wouldn't budge an inch on the wedding day, even though we had informed him well in advance, claiming he had made plans before our daughter's wedding date was set. My husband says it's because my niece gets attached to me, but my daughter doesn't get attached to me at all. But this strong affection for his niece wasn't something new. His attention merely shifted from his sister to his niece. I strongly asked him if he was sure about his decision and if he wouldn't regret prioritizing his niece over our daughter. Getting hated by my niece by prioritizing my daughter would hurt more. It's obvious I'd regret that more. If he feels so strongly, then there's nothing to be done. Our daughter said nothing against my husband's decision, so I figured it'd be a waste of time to try and persuade him further. On the day of the wedding, thanks to a clever move by the sister-in-law's husband, things took an unexpected turn. As a result, my husband came to learn an unthinkable truth, and he was completely taken aback, facing a devastating blow in his life. I'm in my mid-50s, having been married for 28 years. My husband is from the same generation as me, and we met at a dinner party with mutual friends. Back in my 20s, among my parents' age, it was still an era when women were expected to find happiness in marriage and raising children. If I was going to get married anyway, I wanted to do it after I tried my best in my life. So I fought off my parents' silent pressure, but after turning 25, dodging their expectations became hard. So when I discussed it with a friend, she introduced me to my current husband. When asked if I had romantic feelings for my husband, looking back, I think I didn't. I just didn't want to settle down with someone just because my parents preferred. There was some compromise and a rushed decision involved. I believe my husband probably felt the same way. I wanted to continue working at the company where I was employed. I made it clear I wouldn't quit my job, and I didn't believe in the old-fashioned idea that women should only stay at home. Then, my husband encouraged me by telling me that women's social roles are changing in the US as well, and that we should continue to move forward. I took it to mean he was understanding, and I felt intuitively that we could build a happy home together. We quickly grew close, and within about 6 months after we met, we tied the knot and began our life as newlyweds. I wanted to have children while I was young, and then return to the workforce. John supported my thoughts, and with our combined effort, I found out I was pregnant within the first year of our marriage. I gave birth to an only daughter. After that, I was always on move, juggling parenting, household chores, and work. By the time our daughter reached adulthood, all the struggles felt like a part of our shared happiness. I couldn't help but cry in front of her, not caring about others' attention. From all this, one might think we had a picture-perfect family. However, there was a hidden problem with my husband. After marriage, John began revealing his true nature. Firstly, we started splitting all living expenses in half. He made me sign a contract stating that neither of us would ask about each other's salaries. Another clause stated that after deducting the living expenses, whatever my husband did with his salary was none of my business. Behind my husband's actions was the influence of his sister-in-law. While my husband had a rather average look with typical features, his sister had a beauty that was uncommon for ordinary people. It was surprising to hear that my sister-in-law hadn't undergone any cosmetic surgeries. She wasn't just a beauty with a good personality, but rather she was incredibly headstrong with a queen-like demeanor. In every aspect, she was the polar opposite of me, and we couldn't get along. It seemed that she felt the same because she didn't try to interact with me directly, which might have been a blessing. However, that was only true if my husband sided with me. My husband idolized his sister in every way and was a devout follower of hers. It wasn't long after we got married that he started openly showing this unusual affection for her, an affection that went beyond the acceptable range of just being close siblings. At first, I thought they were just a close brother and sister. I've heard from coworkers and seniors that even after marriage, Siblings often visit each other or go on trips together, but it was rare for a brother and sister of opposite genders to be so close. My sister-in-law got married and started a family a bit earlier than my husband did. Upon getting married, she became a full-time housewife. I wondered if she had too much time on her hands, because even after my husband started our family, he would often be called out by her, just as he had been when he was single. I hoped that over time, my husband would prioritize our family more, so I tried not to nag him about it. But when I was pregnant and suffering from severe morning sickness, or when I needed him to accompany me to the hospital due to sudden health issues, he'd always rush to his sister's side whenever she called, like a puppy wagging its tail and running to its owner. Once, I couldn't help myself by any means and asked him strongly why he didn't think of me first, even though I had his child in my belly. Heck, my sister is pregnant too, and she's feeling lonely. Of course I'm gonna prioritize my own family. I prioritize my wife and our child. It was stated with such confidence as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I realized that my husband valued blood ties more than his commitment to me. Maybe the reason he married me was because he had feelings for someone he couldn't be with. If that were the case, it would make sense. I would have felt much better thinking that our marriage was just a sham. I did notice that my husband had an unusual affection towards his sister, but I trusted him as he was cooperative with our family planning. I believed that as our family grew, his affection would naturally turn towards our daughter who shares our blood. If he could shower our child with love, then I was okay with being his second priority. With that resolve, I took great care of the child in my womb and approached my due date. Initially, my husband had promised to be there for the birth, but when the baby didn't arrive as quickly as expected, he chose work over being there for me, saying it was during work hours. It wasn't that there were no grievances, but there was a prevailing attitude at the time. Why should a man sacrifice his work to be present at the birth of a child where he can't particularly help? I thought it was better to go with the flow if my husband was to continue working at his current job, but I braced myself for the challenging solo childbirth. Nevertheless, hearing my baby's first cry was pure joy, wiping away all my worries. Our child was a girl, and she was a bit heavier and bigger than the average baby girl. She grew up healthy, and I believe my husband did love our daughter in his own way. However, as she began to lose her baby features, he became less and less interested in her. My sister-in-law and her husband also had a daughter who was born the same year as our child. Their daughter, our niece, grew up to be a spitting image of her mother in her younger years, a true beauty. My husband started spending more time with his sister and our niece, pretty much ignoring our daughter. I had to play both the mother and father roles, being gentle like a mother, but also strict like a father, in raising our daughter. At my daughter's elementary school sports day, while other fathers participated in events to support and cheer on their children, I had to struggle for my daughter. Meanwhile, my husband's involvement with our niece, who looked just like her mother, grew. Not only did our niece resemble her mother in appearance, but their personalities were strikingly similar as well. She was headstrong and a tad arrogant, acting as though the world revolved around her. My sister-in-law's husband is a very sincere person, but he has become a yes man who can't say anything to his wife or daughter. He worked tirelessly outside, acting merely as a provider for his queen bee-like sister-in-law. Even though he was working hard to pay off their mortgage, he seemed to have no place in their home. My sister-in-law often bragged, "My husband is just an ATM to me." This comment always made the relatives cringe when we gathered for family events. As time went on, our daughter understood her father's nature and started to disregard him. She began treating her father as if he was non-existent. As she entered her typical teenage years, my husband, taking advantage of being neglected by his daughter, increasingly answered his sister's beck and call. He started struggling more and more to meet her often unreasonable demands. Our household felt like a three-legged race, just between my daughter and me. When my daughter reached high school and began working part-time, the agreement of splitting the living expenses between my husband and me broke. If our daughter is working, I only have to contribute a third of the expenses. Right? He claimed, unilaterally amending our agreement. With 2/3 of his salary now free for him to use, he became even more subservient to his sister. Wanting not to burden me, our daughter chose not to attend private schools for both high school and college, and covered her expenses from her part-time earnings. I graciously accepted her contributions and started saving them for her future wedding. Thus, our daughter grew up, graduated from college, and secured a decent job. Even then, our daughter continued to give a portion of her salary to the household. I accepted it as a gesture of her love and continued to save it for her future wedding. About 3 years into her job, my daughter confided in me that she had met someone she wanted to marry. She wanted both my husband and me to meet him at a time convenient for us. Due to my husband's excessive obsession with his sister, our family dynamic wasn't exactly the norm. I had considered the possibility that my daughter might become disillusioned with married life and choose to remain single forever. So knowing she had found someone she was serious about marrying brought me immense relief. At the same time, I was very happy. I was overjoyed that my daughter wanted to marry out of her own will and not due to societal pressures. More than anything, I sincerely hoped for my daughter's future to be filled with even greater happiness. However, my husband seemed more indifferent than calm. He seemed to listen to our daughter's story, nodding when she said she had someone she wanted to marry and that she wanted us to meet him. He wasn't saying he wouldn't meet him, but he stated he couldn't commit to a meeting and left the table. He said we could choose a date for him, and if he had nothing on that day, he'd show up. His attitude was rather careless, as expected, despite our best efforts to schedule a meetup with my daughter's potential spouse well in advance. On the morning of the scheduled meeting, my husband was called out by our niece and left. I had asked him to possibly reschedule, but he said he couldn't make his beloved niece wait, and went on his way. He had told our daughter to marry whoever she wanted, but his actions showed that his loyalty still lay with his sister. My daughter was free to marry whomever she liked, and my husband had no objections. We had planned a gathering with my daughter's potential spouse well in advance, and it was arranged for the guy's parents to join as well. When I found out that his parents would also be present, I informed my husband and he said he understood. He couldn't claim he wasn't aware they would be coming. I was disappointed that my husband couldn't be there, but I greeted my daughter's fiancé and his parents, and simultaneously regretted my husband's absence. I didn't know how to explain it to them without being rude, so I fudged the truth. However, anyone sharp would likely sense that there was some hidden issue in our household. The entire situation had me on edge, fearing that my daughter's engagement might fall apart. Fortunately, both my daughter's fiancé and his parents were understanding and acknowledged that every family has their own private matters. Deep down, no one wants to be associated with a family that has baggage. As time went on, I worried that any emerging issues might put my daughter at a disadvantage. While I was grateful for the generosity of the fiancé's parents, I couldn't help but feel anxious about potential backlash. Then my daughter revealed a certain truth to me. I realized that we needed to address my husband's erratic behavior. I looked forward to the new connections my daughter's marriage would bring. We decided to let the couple handle the details of the wedding date and venue. A few days later, my daughter informed us of the chosen date and venue. Unfortunately, the only availability for the dress she desperately wanted to wear was on that particular day, and her fiancé was on board with it. Given the circumstances, we felt it wasn't our place to interfere. I conveyed my daughter's wishes to my husband and asked him to keep that day free at all costs. However, he replied that he couldn't because he had a trip planned with his niece and sister. He had scheduled this trip before we knew about the wedding date. He also mentioned that he didn't really care about the wedding, as it was our daughter's special day, not his. I argued that the trip with his niece had been scheduled before our daughter's wedding, but he refused to budge. I had never been this persistent, even when he bailed on being present for our daughter's birth. Despite my pleas, my husband showed no intention of changing his plans, even as our daughter's wedding day was fast approaching. I couldn't believe he wouldn't change his plans for his own daughter's wedding. Stubborn. When I say I won't, I won't. Absolute. All right, just remember you said that. Don't regret it later. Regret? I won't. I'd regret it more if I changed my plans with my niece. Since my husband had said that was bad enough, I decided not to bring up the matter any further. Then on the day of our daughter's wedding, my husband, humming, left the house dragging a large suitcase behind him. I was headed to the ceremony venue with my daughter, busy getting her ready in the bride's waiting room. That's when my brother-in-law appeared. From the time I first met him and his wife, he was always somewhat in the background, but today he was particularly noticeable. That's because he had forcibly brought my sister-in-law, niece, and husband with him. He literally dragged both my sister-in-law and my husband by their arms, with my niece chasing after them, asking, "Where are you taking Mommy?" When my brother-in-law approached my daughter and me, he explained the situation. My sister-in-law's husband had originally planned and prepared to attend my daughter's wedding. My sister-in-law and my niece had said they couldn't change their travel plans and wouldn't be attending, so he had understood. This morning, while my brother-in-law was preparing to attend the wedding, and my sister-in-law and my niece were reconfirming their travel plans, my husband showed up, all excited to pick up his sister and niece. When he found out that the bride's father, my husband, was ditching his own daughter's wedding to go on a trip with his sister and niece, he was livid. Usually quiet and almost invisible like an ATM, when my brother-in-law exploded in anger, it seemed my niece, sister-in-law, and husband were all taken aback. Right then and there, my brother-in-law canceled their travel plans. Now that the three of them had their schedules wide open, there was no excuse to miss the wedding, especially after getting an earful from him. My brother-in-law heatedly said things like, "There's no way you can skip your daughter's big day. Act like a real father for your daughter's sake." He also asked his wife why she hadn't curbed her younger brother's behavior or reprimanded her daughter's whims. It was as if the feelings he had been holding back, just like air, had exploded in anger. In truth, it should have been me addressing my husband about all these things. Maybe deep down I had given up on the idea that he'd ever listen. So I just silently watched my giddy husband's selfish behavior, resulting in my brother-in-law dragging them to the venue. I can't tell how my daughter feels about her father prioritizing his niece over her. Despite him flaking on our first family gathering and possibly skipping her wedding day, she's always just brushed it off without a word. Maybe she thinks expecting anything from her father is just a waste of time. I couldn't begin to guess what she was feeling right now, seeing all this unfold before her eyes. But if my daughter says it bothers her, I would have the courage to kick both my husband and my sister-in-law out of the venue. I also want to do something motherly for my daughter on her big day. I want to do something for her. As I waited for my daughter's reaction, my niece and sister-in-law, annoyed about their canceled trip, began to voice their displeasure. "It's so arrogant. He's just an ATM. He cannot lecture me. I've never thought of you as a father. Don't give me that sour-faced lecture. It's so annoying. A wedding for a plain and unremarkable girl like your daughter? What a waste of time, truly. Endless complaints and demands for cancellation fees." Then, the groom and his parents, who had noticed some commotion in my daughter's dressing room, approached us. "If you're having issues, should we call security?" The groom's father offered. Immediately after hearing his voice, my husband's face turned pale. "What? Why is the company president here?" The groom, who had shown concern for my daughter and me, was set to become the CEO of the company where my husband worked. The groom's father was the current CEO. The groom had heard that my daughter and her father weren't particularly close, but he was shocked by the current scene. Being both the CEO of the company where my husband worked and the groom's father, he separated his professional demeanor from his personal life. Yet, when he learned that my husband had chosen to go on a trip with his niece over attending his own daughter's wedding, he approached my husband with a mix of disbelief and anger. Even though he demanded an explanation, my husband, who always prioritized his niece and sister-in-law, said, "Why do I need a reason to prioritize them? They're more important than my own daughter. While this might have been acceptable to me, it wouldn't be in the business world." The CEO firmly held that while family is important, prioritizing nieces over one's own child is unreasonable. Then my husband turned to our daughter for support. Help me out here. I've always prioritized my niece over you, and when I said I wasn't going to attend the wedding, you didn't try to stop me. It's only natural that I'd feel closer to my niece who adores me, rather than my daughter who doesn't show me affection, right? It's not that the daughter wasn't attached to her father. It's that the father never fostered that attachment with his daughter. From when she first started speaking, she knew the word daddy and had once been eager to play with him. She tried to bond with him once, but he consistently chose his niece over her. As a result, she gradually distanced herself, and by her teenage years, she barely acknowledged her father. Instead of being sorry for his past actions, he claims this happened because of the daughter. How can someone be so selfish? We don't need a man who can blatantly claim he's done nothing wrong. In front of his daughter at that moment, I couldn't help but feel that my sister-in-law's husband's actions were unnecessary. While I initially applauded him internally for speaking up, it's ironic that we don't need someone incapable of reflecting on their mistakes. When my husband sought agreement from our daughter and she remained unresponsive, he tried to grab the hem of her wedding gown. However, she quickly pulled away, creating a distance. I stopped thinking of you as my father a long time ago, but still, half of your blood flows inside me. It's disgusting, but my partner told me that I was precious. That's why I tried my best to think that it would be okay if I were to face my father. But now I can't do it anymore. Don't show yourself in front of us again. Our daughter clearly declared her estrangement. Once she has her own family and truly stands on her own, there's no reason for me to endure this situation. He is the worst kind of man who, even on his daughter's special day, blames her to justify himself. You know, I also wanted to tell you something. I'm getting a divorce. In retrospect, I could have raised my daughter without any troubles on my own salary. I shouldn't have worried about society's perception that children might feel pitiable without both parents, or that they might not grow up properly in a single-parent home. All that should have mattered was the happiness and well-being of my daughter and me. Maybe up until now, I unconsciously cared too much about what others would think, just like my parents did. The commotion spread among the other guests, and soon security was called. Eventually, my husband, his sister, and his niece were kicked out of the wedding venue. There were several of his direct bosses and subordinates among the guests. So news of this debacle spread rapidly in his company, severely damaging his reputation. He couldn't maintain his usual confident demeanor at work. Having been told we were divorcing and no longer feeling welcome at home, my husband sought refuge in his sister's home, where his precious niece lived. But suddenly, the niece, who had always adored him, and his sister, who had always said he was their only hope, turned their backs on him. What do you have left once the only thing you had going for you, your money, is gone? I'm not interested in a man without money. I really misjudged you. I thought you had a dull wife and had trained her well, but you're turning the tables on me. A man without money is worthless, isn't he? Just disappear. Until now, my husband had constantly belittled my brother-in-law, treating him like a mere ATM, only to finally realize that he was treated the same way. Then, like flipping a hand, my heartbroken husband tried to cozy up to me again. All that truly matters is you and our daughter, who shares my blood. He pleaded with me to reconsider the divorce, promising to change his ways, but my mind was made up. He never listened to my requests before. So why should I, who have put up with so much, have to listen to him now? I was ready to move out, already having secured a new place. Ignoring his desperate pleas, I left the house. His whining echoed behind me until the door slammed shut, but I never looked back. The moment I stepped out of the property, I felt an overwhelming sense of liberation from the long bond of marriage. Shortly after, our divorce was finalized surprisingly smoothly. My ex-husband, disgusted with everything, seemed to want to wrap things up quickly. While it worked out well for me, my ex-husband, who acted on impulse, faced challenges down the road. For my part, I started living freely on my own, and I found great joy in working hard without having to worry about household chores. The major problem waiting for my ex-husband was the mortgage. When we first took out the mortgage, We both had jobs, and that was considered when determining the repayment term. I think with his current salary, he could just about manage to live alone, but there had been ongoing issues at his workplace regarding his arrogant attitude toward his subordinates. Adding to that, his rude behavior at the future company president's wedding and other personal issues led him to be sidelined at work, in a position where his presence didn't really matter. Not only was he denied any chance of promotion or raises, but his salary was also significantly reduced. With that reduced income, continuing to pay off the high mortgage became challenging, leading him to eventually give up the house he'd lived in for over 25 years. It seems my ex-husband moved into a small, old, cheap apartment, taking only the bare essentials with him. I've heard the walls are thin, and you can hear the neighbors' noises in that rundown place. My sister-in-law quickly cast aside her penniless brother and seemed to have a plan to wait for things to cool down, showing some kindness to her husband. However, things didn't go as easily as the sister-in-law hoped, and she was told by her husband that he wanted a divorce. What? You've got to be kidding. Who do you think you are? I'm the one who should be asking for a divorce, and you should agree to it. Got it? The proud sister-in-law was deeply hurt and humiliated to be told about the divorce from her not-so-impressive husband. I've heard she's been going around saying she was the one who demanded the divorce and made him agree. Furthermore, my sister-in-law, who prides herself on looking young and beautiful even in her 50s, firmly believes that no man could resist her charms. She's been attending senior dating events that cater to wealthy men. I'm gonna remarry a rich man and live the high life, she'd often boast. Indeed, as confident as my sister-in-law may seem, I can't help but feel sorry for her. As my sister-in-law is, when she attends these dating events, many older gentlemen are eager to flock around her. However, because she is incredibly haughty with an insatiable pride, I have heard she has never managed to secure a date after any of these events. My niece is the same age as my daughter, but she lacks real-world experience. Though one might commend her for being studious, the reality is she failed in her job hunting. Concerned about appearances, my sister-in-law suggested that she continue her studies in graduate school. My niece seemed to enjoy her time there, especially the attention she received from her male peers. But things took a turn after her parents' divorce. First off, my sister-in-law had been a stay-at-home mom, so there was no money to keep my niece in graduate school. Although they kept their house after the divorce, since her husband moved out, they still needed money to live on. Their savings began to run out quickly. It was only a matter of time before my niece's tuition went unpaid. She was told to drop out and start job hunting immediately. But since it was discovered during the interview that the reason she went to graduate school was not to study seriously, there was no way my niece was going to be hired mid-career. Around the time they started struggling for even the next day's meal, my niece began working in a nightclub. At first, her good looks got her some attention, but her arrogant attitude toward others caused trouble with the customers. She kept switching her workplace, so her income was never stable, leading to financial hardships. Now, it seems she is getting by selling designer items that she had previously demanded my ex-husband and my former sister-in-law's husband buy for her. Today is my birthday. Hurry back home and get ready to celebrate. My mother-in-law, Barbara, has a habit of calling at the most inappropriate times, and today is no exception. Unfortunately, today is the funeral of my own mother. Despite having informed her about the funeral in advance, Barbara kept calling repeatedly, making me think it must be something urgent, so I decided to answer. I was in a situation where I couldn't step away, so I answered on speakerphone, and her voice ended up echoing throughout the venue. Hearing this, my father John started trembling, and things began to spiral out of control. From there, my name is Naomi, and I turned 43 this year. I have been with my husband Alex since our student days, and we have been married for 17 years after tying the knot at 26. Alex is usually quite reserved and doesn't talk much, so sometimes I find it hard to know what he is thinking. But I can clearly feel that he cares about me a lot. I can say this because whenever I was harassed by Barbara, Alex always stood by my side. Barbara is a difficult person, and even my parents opposed. Our marriage was opposed by my parents because of her, especially my mother. She repeatedly told me that marriage isn't just about love, it involves the whole family. I was worried that you might end up suffering in the future. In fact, I have been receiving various forms of harassment from Barbara. Despite my mother's advice, I still went ahead and married Alex. However, there were times when I found it hard to bear Barbara's harassment. Every time I consulted Alex about it, he would speak to Barbara, but then she would start mumbling under her breath when no one else was around. When I couldn't take it anymore and consulted my mother about Barbara, she would always reassure me, saying, "It's okay. You have me and Alex, don't you?" Then the other day, my dear mother passed away. I loved her so much, so when I heard the news of her passing, I was truly shocked. I became unable to do anything for myself, couldn't swallow any food, and couldn't sleep at night. Alex took care of me while handling the household chores, and he even took time off work to handle the funeral arrangements. On the day of my mother's funeral, he took a day off to help my father, Michael, and me. 2 days after her passing, the funeral was held, and we were busy finding a funeral director and deciding who to invite. But even during this time, Barbara kept harassing me. In the midst of searching for a funeral director, she would call relentlessly, saying things like, "I want to go shopping now. Can you come with me? I also need to buy rice, so I need a car." She was completely disregarding my situation. I told her I couldn't do it, but she wouldn't listen, so I ended up going shopping with her just once. Of course, Barbara knew about my mother's death. She has experienced the death of her own parents and knows how hard it is, yet she still did this to me, making me dislike her even more. Alex always takes my side, but Barbara seems to be discontent with that as well. After being pointed out by Alex, Barbara called me and said, "Your child has grown up like this. It must be the parents' fault." And then she hung up without listening to anything I had to say. My mother raised me with love and sometimes with strictness. I'm proud of her, and I have never once spoken ill of her or behaved in a way that would disparage her. I know I need to do something about Barbara, but before I could figure it out, the day of my mother's funeral arrived. It was the last day I could see my mother, so I wanted to give her a grand farewell. I did ask Barbara if she was going to attend, but it seems she didn't want to. To be honest, I didn't want her to come either, so it worked out for me. Barbara didn't even send a condolence telegram, let alone give a condolence money. I already knew she was that kind of person. It didn't really bother me, but it was indeed very Barbara-like. "I'm really sorry. I know she's my mother, but I'm truly embarrassed. She wasn't like this before, but she became selfish after my father passed away." Alex apologized, and I replied that I was fine, but I would prefer to keep my distance from her as much as possible. I've told Alex my feelings many times, but for some reason, Barbara keeps trying to reach out to me. It's a very tiring situation, and I can only imagine that Alex, being stuck in the middle, must be having an even harder time. At my mother's funeral, the attendees included me, Alex, my father, my mother's relatives, and Alex's father, James. James seems to not get along well with Barbara, as they are already divorced. However, they both get along well with me and Alex. Barbara has always had a bad attitude, you know? If you ask me why I married her, well, I can only say that it was a spur-of-the-moment decision. He would talk like this every time we met. This time, when I told him over the phone that my mother had passed away, he responded, "I'm sorry for your loss. I've only met your mom a few times, but she was a really wonderful person. Of course, I'll attend the funeral." On the day of the funeral, as the attendees gathered, the service began. I made sure my smartphone wouldn't make any notification sounds during the funeral, but I left the vibration function on just in case something urgent came up and I needed to respond quickly. A while after the funeral started, my phone, which was in my bag, began to vibrate. It only vibrated once, so I didn't worry about it, but then it vibrated several more times. Thinking it might be something urgent, I stood up to check my phone, and there was Barbara's name on the screen. Although I didn't want to, I decided to answer the phone just in case it was something important. "Hello? What's up?" I asked. "You took forever to answer. How many times do you think I called you?" Barbara's voice came through the phone. "I'm in the middle of my mother's funeral right now. If it's not urgent, can you please call me back later?" I replied, "What? You're giving me attitude now? Do you even remember what day it is today?" Barbara's voice sounded annoyed. "Today is the day of my mother's funeral." I couldn't think of anything else, so I answered honestly. "Today is my birthday? Did you forget?" I was taken aback by her words. "Come back home quickly and prepare for the celebration." I was so surprised that I accidentally dropped my phone. I picked it up and confirmed again, but it was indeed a call from Barbara telling me to celebrate her birthday. So I'm currently at my mother's funeral. I will definitely prepare for the celebration after it's over, so please wait for me. I told her before hanging up and returning to the funeral. I was astounded by Barbara's words, and after telling her that, I hung up and returned to the funeral. "What happened? Is there some trouble?" Alex asked me, but I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I told him it was nothing. Throughout the meal and cremation, Barbara kept calling me, but I decided to ignore all her calls. It was probably just her telling me to come back quickly, and I could deal with that after the funeral. However, I hadn't thought about celebrating Barbara's birthday at all. After all the mean things she had done to me, expecting me to celebrate her birthday now seemed incredibly audacious. And then, just as the funeral was about to end, something in my bag accidentally pressed against my phone screen, and I answered Barbara's call, which was for some reason on speakerphone. The next moment, despite being in the middle of my mother's funeral, Barbara's voice echoed throughout the venue. "When are you coming back?" "Today's my birthday. Hurry up and come back to prepare for the celebration." Her voice was so loud that everyone turned to look at me. Realizing this was bad, I tried to hang up, but my father, Michael, who was nearby, asked me, "What's going on? Was that Barbara?" I couldn't lie, so I explained everything that had just happened to my father. Then, he clenched his fist until his knuckles turned white and started to tremble. My father is usually a calm person, but when he gets angry, he is terrifyingly scary. Moreover, he has a personality that drives people into a corner until they hit rock bottom, so no one can go against him. However, what he says is always right. And right now, my father is incredibly angry right before my eyes. "Give me your phone," he demanded, snatching it from my hand. Meanwhile, Barbara was still shouting something over the phone, but as soon as she heard his voice, she suddenly became silent. "Hello, this is Naomi's father, Michael. May I ask if this is Barbara?" "Eh? Oh, Michael, are you?" Barbara's tone changed as she realized who was speaking. "It's been a while. You were shouting quite loudly just now, but it's your birthday today, isn't it?" "Happy birthday. By the way, do you know what day it is today?" I timidly looked at my father's face as he spoke, and while there was a smile on his face, his eyes were not smiling. This is the expression he has when he is truly angry. I have hardly ever seen my father angry, but there was one time I witnessed him getting angry. It was when a man bumped into my mother on the street for no reason. Instead of apologizing, the man started berating my mother. My father, who walks fast, was a few meters ahead of my mother, but he noticed and came back. "Do you need something from my wife?" he asked, placing his hand on the man's shoulder. The man turned around, froze, and then ran away. That's true. My dad is about 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighs around 200 pounds. He has a shaved head, so he looks intimidating to anyone who sees him. A man who was acting boldly just a moment ago ran away without saying anything as soon as he saw my dad. Of course, Barbara has met my dad before, so she generally knows what he's like. During the meeting of both families, Barbara was using words to belittle me, so my dad confronted her, saying, "Does that mean you think my daughter is a failure? I don't understand. How could someone like you give birth to a wonderful man like Alex? I can't figure it out, no matter how many times I think about it." That made the atmosphere turn sour instantly. While my dad is always a strong ally by my side, it seems he can be a bit too honest at times. "We're in the middle of a funeral, right?" "I know that, because you told me earlier. The living are more important than the deceased. Just go and buy some steak or something for the birthday celebration." Since he was on speakerphone, Barbara's voice was resounding throughout the venue. Everyone was watching nervously to see what my dad would say next. But contrary to expectations, he said, "Understood. The funeral will be over soon, so I'll tell Naomi to head straight there." I was so surprised that he would say something like that. I couldn't help but blurt out, "Wait a minute, Dad, I'm not going, okay?" My dad put his index finger to his lips and silently gestured for me to be quiet. Maybe he has some kind of plan. I don't understand what he's thinking, so first I decide to wait for the phone call to end. But even after the call ended, my dad didn't say anything and we had to resume the funeral. The continuation of the funeral took place and it finally ended around 5 p.m. "Hey Dad, I really don't want to celebrate her birthday." "Don't worry, I have a proper plan. Naomi, you just need to drive. Can we stop by my house before heading to the supermarket? I'm feeling uneasy not knowing what my dad is thinking, but so far he has never been wrong. I have absolute trust in him, even though I'm not convinced." So I decide to follow his instructions. Since Alex had taken time off work, he went back to work right after the funeral and didn't come with us to Barbara's house. When we arrived at the supermarket, my dad bought a cake and steaks, and then he returned to the car with a large envelope from the house. "The funeral for Mom just ended, and I'm really sorry to ask this of you. Could we go to Barbara's house next?" Judging from the cake and steak in my dad's hands, it seems he intends to celebrate Barbara's birthday. I've told him I don't want to do this, so why is he trying? Why is he trying to accommodate Barbara's request? The uneasiness doesn't clear away, but we've come this far, and there's no turning back now. I grip the steering wheel tightly and drive towards Barbara's house. "Dad, are you really planning to celebrate her birthday?" "Yeah, that's the plan. But at the same time, I intend to give Barbara a piece of my mind," he replied. It seems he has something in mind, after all. When I ask him what he's thinking, he just says, "You'll see when we get there. It'll be clear once we arrive," and doesn't give me a straight answer. So I decide not to ask anything more until we reach Barbara's house. It takes about an hour to drive from the funeral to Barbara's house. When we arrive, my dad takes the cake, steaks, and the large envelope and rings the doorbell. Barbara shows up at the front door right away, surprised to see my dad. "Oh, so you came too, Michael?" "Yes, I heard it's Barbara's birthday. It's not much, but I brought some food and a gift. May I come in?" Barbara was hesitant at first, seeing my dad eager to enter the house. But as soon as she realized she was getting a feast and a gift, she let us in without any hesitation. "Was it really okay for you to prepare a feast and a gift for me?" Barbara's tone changed completely when she realized we were there to celebrate her birthday, and she started speaking in a sweet voice. I grilled the steaks and arranged them on the dining table along with the cake. Wow, the steaks and the cake look delicious. "Shall we eat?" "Before we eat, please wait a moment." My dad interrupted just as Barbara was about to dig in with her knife and fork. I was curious to know what he was about to say, but Barbara was visibly frustrated, having to wait with a hot steak right in front of her. "What is it? Hurry up, or the steak will get cold. This won't take long. Here's your present," my dad said, handing her the envelope. "What's this?" she asked, looking puzzled. "It's a land title deed," he replied. For a moment, Barbara seemed to not understand what was going on, but upon checking the contents of the envelope, she froze. Barbara lived in a single-family home, but in fact, the land was owned by her father. Her father had inherited several pieces of land over the generations, and he was renting them out to friends and relatives. Barbara was one of those people, and when it was decided that I would marry Alex, it was also decided that the land would be rented to her. At that time, James was also living with us, so we decided to build a single-family house, and my father was covering the expenses. Several years later, Barbara divorced James and lived alone in this house, but the owner was still my father. "What is this? What does this mean?" "No, I thought you might have forgotten, but I just wanted to remind you that I own this land and house. You've been living here out of my goodwill, but I've decided to reconsider everything due to recent events." According to my father, he had decided to stop renting the house to Barbara. He figured she couldn't leave right away, so he was going to give her 1 week. 1 week? There's no way I can leave in such a short time. And just try to make me leave, I won't go, I guarantee it. Is that so? Well, I have other plans in mind. What are you going to do? Honestly, I had no idea what my father was thinking. I was surprised enough that my usually gentle father was this angry and telling her to leave, but now I was wondering what he would do next. As I thought this, my father started making a call to someone. Judging from the conversation, it seemed like he was talking to a lawyer. It appeared my father was trying to forcibly evict Barbara from the house. Hey, wait a minute. Are you really trying to kick me out just because of that? It's just a funeral, right? It wasn't a big deal when you guys left halfway through, and hearing this, my father trembled with rage. I think Alex and James are really good people, but I can't forgive you. I said earlier I'd wait a week, but I want you to leave right now. I will report you for trespassing, he declared sternly. What you've done until now is truly unforgivable. That's why I agree with my father's opinion, I added. Trespassing? I live here, you know. Don't you get it yet? It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that you've been living off of us. Barbara tried to argue back, but being someone who always cares about what others think, she might have thought it would be bad to actually get reported. So she left the house with only the bare minimum of her belongings. After that, Barbara went to a friend's house, but she was turned away. She is known for saying unpleasant things to friends and neighbors, so no one probably wanted to take her in. Unable to be accepted by anyone, Barbara reluctantly decided to go to her sister's house. Jessica, who is Barbara's older sister, does have a stronger personality than Barbara, but she has always been incredibly kind to me. Naomi, I know it's been tough for you as well. I've lived with Barbara since we were little, so I know what she's like. She gets angry when things don't go her way, and she always tries to assert her dominance, doesn't she? If you ever run into any trouble, don't hesitate to tell me, okay? She was always considerate of my feelings and made an effort to keep in touch, informing me via phone whenever Barbara visited her place and giving me updates on how Barbara was doing. Despite her complaints about me and our father, Barbara would be in trouble if she didn't have someone like Jessica to rely on. Trouble would arise if she lost her place to live. It seems like she is desperately trying to mend her relationship with Jessica, although all of their conversations are transparent to us. Then Jessica told me, Naomi, you and your father probably don't want anything to do with Barbara anymore, right? Don't worry about it. We'll take care of everything from here on. We'll let you know if there's any progress. Barbara is a scattered person, so it's impossible for her to have any savings. Even if she receives a pension, she ends up spending it all. Moreover, since she has no one else to rely on, she eventually ended up living with Jessica. Since Jessica lives on the same property as her sons, even though it's just the two elderly women living together, someone could come to their aid if anything happens. Thinking this would give us peace of mind, we decided to send Barbara's belongings to Jessica's place and put the house up for sale right away. The property is located in a prime location, so it sold quickly, and we were finally able to get Barbara out of the house for good. However, Barbara sometimes calls me and says, "Come pick me up quickly." I hate living with my sister. She makes me do everything, and she's always making snide remarks. If you feel sorry for me, help me out. It sounds like you're going through exactly what I went through with you before, Barbara. I'm not going through that again, I told her, and Alex agrees with me. After saying that, I hung up the phone, and I have since ignored all calls from Barbara. And since then, I've been living happily with Alex. I did propose to my father to live with us, but he declined, saying, I'm still perfectly capable of living on my own. Plus, I got enough funds set aside for my retirement, so if I can't live by myself anymore, I'll just move into a facility. Although Alex was supportive of my father living with us, we couldn't force him since he was so against the idea. In the end, nothing changed, and I continue to live with just Alex. But there has been one change since then. Alex has started to open up more about his feelings and thoughts. After the whole incident with Barbara, I went through a period of emotional instability. I couldn't cook, and stress-induced insomnia made it hard for me to concentrate. That's when a doctor told me, Naomi, you must have been under a lot of stress. I can tell you've been holding a lot in. Right now, Alex's support is crucial, so he needs to make an effort not to worry you. Ever since that day, Alex has been talking to me more. I feel like eating an omelet today. I'll go to the supermarket, so can you make it? He would make food requests, and sometimes he'd say, "We haven't been going out much lately. How about we go for a drive for a change of scenery?" And he'd take me to a beach a couple of hours away by car. I can really feel that he's making an effort to think about me and what I need. Even though he's not great at expressing his feelings, I truly appreciate his attempts to show his love for me. It's probably all thanks to the incident with Barbara. As terrible as that experience was, ranking among the top 3 worst times of my life, it ultimately helped me move towards a happier life. I like to think that a higher power has been watching over me, rewarding my past deeds with happiness now. Just like before, I want to live a life that I can be proud of without feeling ashamed in front of anyone. Ow, it hurts. Toby! I can only whimper softly as I protect my aching back and legs. The moment I arrived at my apartment's parking lot, the car that had been parked in front of me suddenly sped towards me at a furious pace. Before I could dodge, the car hit me, and a loud thud echoed throughout the parking lot. I hit the asphalt hard with my back and butt, and as I was enduring that pain, I squinted due to the pain in my thigh. Perhaps I got a cut from the fall. Blood was steadily oozing from my thigh. Everything went white before my eyes, but I heard the car door open. Out from the passenger side stepped my husband. "Oh, it's you." I called out to my husband with a trembling voice, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Walking to the front of the car, my husband's gaze was fixed solely on the front bumper that had hit me. My husband carefully examined the car from every angle, not responding at all, no matter how much I called out to him. When he finally seemed to snap out of it, he looked to the driver's seat with a gentle smile and said, "There's no damage to the car." "Are you okay, Mom?" That was a shock, wasn't it? It seemed that to Bob, his pale-faced mother-in-law in the driver's seat was more important than me, leading right in front of him. Rage surged from deep within me, and after that, my name is Catherine. I'm a 25-year-old office worker. I moved from a remote island in Hawaii to a university in New York and landed a job near the university right after. I started dating a salesman, Dave, who came to our company, and we just got married a month ago. Catherine, even if you're going to continue working, where should we live? Maybe we should consider buying a house soon. Why don't we rent an apartment for now? We can look for a place and discuss what kind of house to build later. But I also want to live in our own house someday, so let's start saving up. Just talking about the future made us happy. Dave was an only child. His family consisted of just him and his parents. Just my mother-in-law. A few years ago, his father passed away, leaving Dave and my mother-in-law. Soon to be married, we had been looking at various rental properties, but one day, my mother-in-law suggested that we live with her. While I was hesitant about living together so soon after getting married, Dave quickly assured my mother-in-law that we wouldn't. Instead, he mentioned that he didn't want to leave my mother-in-law alone, so he suggested renting a place close to my in-laws' house. I thought it was better than living together, so I agreed. We decided to rent an apartment within walking distance from my in-laws' house in Nebraska. Catherine, thank you so much. I'm so glad to have both of you nearby. After your father-in-law passed away, it was just me and Dave. If Dave had left too, I would have been scared. So thank you truly. Thank you too. I'm glad to have you close by, mother-in-law. And this dinner is so delicious. Thank you. It's no problem, darling. Cooking in big batches always tastes better, so don't mention it. Since we were in walking distance, my mother-in-law often checked on us. Both of us were working full-time, and when our busy periods overlapped, we'd get home late. Knowing this, she would bring over a home-cooked meal once a week. Honestly, we usually come home late during our busy times, so having my mother-in-law's cooked dinner was a lifesaver. My mother-in-law is a kind and wonderful person. I felt lucky to have found such a loving partner. My own mother had always been delighted with my husband and mother-in-law, saying they were wonderful people since our marriage introduction. My husband and I continued to enjoy our married life, always getting along. On weekends, we often went for drives. My husband loves cars and he drives a big right-hand drive vehicle. You really love cars, don't you, Dave? I've never met anyone who loves cars as much as you do. Really? My car is always clean, right? I think I have to keep it clean, especially when I'm driving you around, Catherine. Just like my husband says, riding in a clean car feels good. I love these moments with my husband. I believed that this happiness would last forever. However, I started feeling that our days might be disrupted about a month after our marriage. Mom, stop it. I'm not a kid. I can eat on my own. But look, what if you hurt your hand? You work on the computer, so it's a no-no. I can manage. Catherine's here too. It's okay. I've always helped you like this, right? Let me do it for you. That day, my mother-in-law came to our place with crab. My mother-in-law carefully removed the crab meat and handed it to my husband. I watched this scene from the kitchen, finding it odd. My husband is the same age as me. He can eat crab on his own, and even though he works with computers, he's more of a salesperson who travels, so it's not a critical issue. When he ate crab with me, he peeled it and ate by himself, without getting hurt. Dave, look at this piece. It's loaded with meat. Here, open up. It's okay. I can eat by myself. Just drop it, okay? My mother-in-law was snugly feeding him crab right next to my husband. Honestly, I thought he could eat it, even if she wasn't that close to him. Starting that day, I began to notice how close my husband was to my mother-in-law. After feeling that way, I started to be bothered by every little thing. Today I'm gonna drop my mom off at her class. Wait, what? Weren't we gonna go to a movie this evening? I even bought the tickets. I'm sorry. The movie will probably be out on DVD soon, so we can watch it then. Since we already bought the tickets, just go see it by yourself today. It might not be to the point where he's a mama's boy, but for some reason, my husband always listens to what my mother-in-law says. A little while ago, my mother-in-law suddenly called in the evening saying she wanted sushi. That day, we had planned to go out for a barbecue. We were just about to leave the house when she called. I thought maybe we'd all go to the sushi place together, but my husband just told me, sorry, go have dinner by yourself, and left to meet my mother-in-law. When I confronted my husband after he returned home, he just said he'd be careful next time. But he never changed. Whenever there was a clash between something I wanted and what my mother-in-law wanted, for some reason, he always prioritized my mother-in-law. And my mother-in-law just took it for granted. In fact, my mother-in-law tried to stay close to my husband as much as possible. It seemed like it was my husband's idea, but my mother-in-law started delivering dinner to our place and often stayed to eat with us. This became a weekly, sometimes bi-weekly routine. Even if I kept refusing, thinking it would be too much of a burden on my mother-in-law, she just brushed it off with, I live close by, so it's okay. On top of that, she would invite us over to my in-laws' home for tea or meals during the weekends. Naturally, our alone time as a couple dwindled, and I couldn't find time to do house chores over the weekend. If I suggested my husband go alone, my mother-in-law would strongly request that I come along too. Whether she came to our place or we were called to my in-laws, it was always the same. My mother-in-law started criticizing me for not doing enough around the house. The house? Catherine, I know you both work, but you need to prepare a decent dinner. Relying solely on takeout is just not how a housewife should be. Excuse me, when I get home late, it's been arranged for Dave to buy his favorite takeout. What on earth is that? Not only do you barely cook, but you're letting your husband do the grocery shopping for dinner? Can't believe it. Do you even realize how busy Dave is? You're his wife. You should be thinking about your family's nutrition and at least preparing meals. Upon hearing my words, my mother-in-law's eyes widened in surprise. The older woman crossed her arms, looking up at me, and began to speak in a firm tone. Honestly, I'm the one making most of your dinners, aren't I? I thought maybe once a week because of being busy, but now it's twice, sometimes even 3 times. Plus, you eat at our place on weekends. You hardly ever have the chance to make dinner yourself. Everyone's busy. You can't just use that as an excuse all the time. I couldn't hide my sigh at my mother-in-law's words. Who did she think was to blame for the reduced time to prepare dinner? The unsolicited meals, despite numerous refusals, were always pushed onto us by my mother-in-law. As I was about to retort, my husband stepped in front of me and gave me a stern look. That's right, Catherine. Mom's cooking is delicious. But you can't always take advantage of it. It's too much of a burden on her. And, only eating takeout isn't healthy. You gotta start making some homemade meals from time to time. Well said, Dave. After all, in a marriage, the husband really needs to keep his wife in line, doesn't he? But, Dave, it's not that your mom doesn't like cooking. I know, Mom, your home-cooked meals are my favorite. And then my mother-in-law and my husband seem to create a world of just the two of them. They didn't notice that I was saying nothing, nor the cold stare I was giving them. Catherine is young, so I get it. Even if she had time, I doubt she could whip up a tasty meal. Probably some overseasoned dish without giving much thought to nutrition. Exactly. Catherine loves barbecue, so there are a lot of meat dishes. Plus, she's a bit naive about some things. Meat isn't the be-all and end-all. You gotta think about veggies, too. Catherine isn't quite there yet in terms of nutrition. She doesn't have the experience as a housewife like you do, Mom. My husband stated, joining my mother-in-law and belittling me. I mean, at this point, it seems ridiculous to even argue. If I just keep quiet and wish they'd hurry up and leave, they'd just gang up and ridicule me. I apologize for being rude. But even if I ignore that, my mother-in-law will eventually return to her own home. As soon as she leaves, my husband starts playing games on his phone, and I confront him. Hey, what's going on? You have her bring over food she wasn't even asked to make, then get mad at me for not cooking. I can't cook because she always brings over so much food. And you two keep nagging about cooking and cleaning, but don't you realize that with her frequent visits, I don't have the time? If you want me to do these things, stop inviting her. If you prefer her company, why don't you just go live with her? At my words, my husband glances at me and smirks. What's the matter? Jealous? We've always been close, you know? People in town talk about how close we are. Besides, if you learned from my mom, you'd get better at these things, right? Instead of telling her not to come, why don't you learn a thing or two? Excuse me? Taken aback by his nonsensical response, I was left speechless. Maybe he wasn't expecting a reply, because my husband's attention shifted back to his phone game. I could feel the weight in my heart. Dave was no longer the man I had once fallen in love with. After that, I started standing up to my mother-in-law, even if it meant her disliking me. Still, she would often barge in saying, "I'm here to teach you." Finally, at my wit's end, I didn't let her into the house when she arrived and told her bluntly that she was being a nuisance. My mother-in-law looked stunned, but then shouted back in anger. After pushing her out the front door and firmly closing it, the next thing I knew, my husband came home, and together they stormed into the living room, shouting and causing a scene. That seemed to be the last straw. My mother-in-law even started interfering in my work. Catherine, can't you cut back a bit on your work hours? The house isn't clean even during the weekdays. Shouldn't you be keeping it tidy? Today is Dave's turn to tidy up. So please tell Dave. How could you? Making your hard-working husband clean the house? I work outside too. We both work, so both of us should share household chores. Even though my mother-in-law understands the concept of both partners working, she firmly believes that household chores are the wife's responsibility. That's probably why she thinks I'm pushing those duties onto my husband. My mother-in-law sighed deeply, looking exasperated. Catherine, there's a difference in income between you and Dave. Isn't it common for the one earning less, like you, to handle more household chores? If you can't handle that, maybe you should consider cutting back on your work hours. Consider being a stay-at-home wife. Unfortunately, our incomes are nearly the same. Plus, on Dave's income alone, it's impossible for me to stay home. That's why I have to work too. We both work full-time and get home around the same time. Yet you expect only me to handle the chores? It's not about when you get home. You clearly lack respect and gratitude towards your hard-working husband. Without waiting for my retort, my mother-in-law dramatically waved her hand and let out another exasperated sigh. I wanted to retort that there was no gratitude or respect from my husband, but my mother-in-law wasn't even trying to listen to me anymore. Despite the ongoing conflict between my mother-in-law and me, my husband had never once listened to my side of the story. Instead, he teamed up with my mother-in-law, taking her side and blaming me. He stopped doing any chores around the house and started spending more time at my in-laws' home than at our own. Whenever I pointed this out, he'd lash out at me with incredible fury. So I just let him go on like this. It was easier for me to let him spend time at my in-laws' house rather than being with him. Then one day, I got off work early from a nearby company and was walking home. Just as I entered the apartment complex grounds, I saw my husband and mother-in-law about to head out, as our car was parked there. I didn't want to greet them and was about to walk past quickly when suddenly the car lurched forward, aiming straight for me. I tried to dodge, but the car was too fast and it knocked me off my feet. Thankfully, my head was spared, but my leg throbbed with pain. It seemed I had grazed my skin against the rough asphalt when I fell, causing a deep cut. Blood streamed from my thigh. As I wondered what to do, feeling faint from the blood loss, I heard the sound of a car door opening. Out stepped only my husband. He left the passenger door open and began inspecting the area of the car that likely hit me. He didn't even look at me. In the driver's seat, with a pale face, sat my mother-in-law, who made no move to get out. "Hey!" I called out to my husband, who was still inspecting the front bumper. Finally, he stood up. Still bleeding, I thought I needed to get to a hospital, but my husband turned away, walking toward the driver's side. "The car's fine, not a scratch." "Mom, are you okay?" Must have been a shock, right? "Are you good?" I was dumbfounded. Here I was, bleeding in front of him, and all he cared about was the car and my mother-in-law. At my mother-in-law's reassurance, my husband smiled warmly, about to get back into the car when finally, he looked at me. "Hey, don't just sit in the middle of the road. Heck, you're blocking cars, you know?" My husband didn't even show concern for me, and his careless remark made my anger explode. "Are you kidding me? You hit someone with your car and then talk to me like that? It's you who's messing around. You suddenly jumped out and that's why I hit you. Then you blame my mom. By the way, what were you gonna do if the car got damaged?" At this point, I couldn't believe my husband was the same man I knew. He hit someone, caused injury, and then said it was the victim's fault. Without a word of concern, my husband gestured widely, signaling for me to move to the side of the road. Worried about the car after seeing someone bleed? You saw me right in front of you, didn't you? It's on you for speeding into me. Who floors it in a parking lot anyway? What if it was someone else? Would you say the same? Huh? You're not a stranger. You're family. Do you understand that if I hit you, I'm the one paying for the repairs? Hitting you doesn't benefit me a dime. Do you get that? What do you mean it doesn't benefit you? You are the one who hit me. Why am I the one being blamed? As my husband and I argued, my mother-in-law, who had been in the driver's seat, finally got out of the car. My mother-in-law approached me, standing tall, looking down at me. "Catherine, do you know how much Dave's car costs? You came charging in and then had the nerve to speak like this. You should be apologizing first." I was completely dumbfounded, realizing firsthand what that expression meant. Even though she was the one who floored the gas pedal, causing the car to speed up, for some reason, my mother-in-law seemed to believe that I was the one who ran into them. "Why are you playing the victim? This happened because you weren't walking at the edge. Just like Dave said, this is on you." "That's right. It's on Catherine. Just go home and take care of the house. That's all you're good for now." I was at a loss for words. Both my mother-in-law and my husband insisted that I had run into them at full speed. My head was spinning from their outrageous claims. Seeing me stunned, my husband forcefully dragged me to the side of the road. Ignoring my groans of pain, he just drove off. Soon after, someone rushed to my side. "Are you okay? I've called the police. Let's get you to a hospital." The person comforting me was a colleague who lived in the same apartment complex. I remembered she was off today, and while thinking about borrowing a towel or something because of the mess, my head started to spin again. Apparently, I had lost too much blood. I realized what had happened when I was being treated in the hospital and recounted the events to the doctors. They told me I needed to be hospitalized for a few days. But I wasn't prepared for this at all. I wasn't sure if my husband was home to bring me things from our place. I didn't really want to rely on him even if he was there. Luckily, there was a gift shop in the hospital, so I asked the nurse to get the essentials for me. The moment I finished calling my company and expressing my gratitude to the colleague who had brought me there, my freshly turned off smartphone vibrated. It was a call from my husband. I hadn't planned on answering, but I accidentally tapped to answer since I had just been on a call with my colleague. I could hear my husband's voice saying, "You finally answered. My mom is in a bad situation because of you, and you dare to ignore calls from the family?" I replied firmly to my husband's accusation. "What? Who are you? There's no hit-and-run driver in my family." Confused, my husband continued, "You too think my mom did a hit-and-run? Everyone in the neighborhood is talking about how mom hit someone and fled. The cops might come. You reported it, didn't you? Apologized to them and to my mom. It was a misunderstanding. She hit someone and drove away. That's hit and run. And for the record, I didn't report it. When I told my agitated husband that it was my colleague who called the police after taking me to the hospital, I heard a faint click of his tongue. He then said, "Just clear it up with the police and it'll all be fine. Hurry up and get here. I have to stay in the hospital. And weren't you sitting in the passenger seat? Do you really think I just randomly walked into the car and fell?" My husband's comment, trying to play the victim, pushed me to respond. But before I could, he began talking to me in a condescending tone. "Listen, Catherine. If everyone thinks my mom hit you by mistake, how do you think she'd feel? She might get so scared she won't drive again. That's just sad. I don't understand what you're saying. I'd prefer someone who drives that dangerously to not drive at all. Why are you being like this? If you just tell the police you weren't looking either, it'll all work out. Don't families help each other out when things get tough?" His annoying tone made me sigh deeply. What you call family and what I call family seem different. When I'm discharged, I'll be sending you divorce papers. The police want my statement too, so I'm going to hang up. Shocked, my husband asked, Whoa, why are we talking about divorce over something between my mom and you?" Unable to bear his words, I hung up. To calm my boiling rage, I took several deep breaths. And as I planned my next steps, I decided to go back to my parents' house. To get to my parents' house, which is similar to an island off the coast of Maine, you have to take a plane and a ferry. Although it's far and challenging to get there, I couldn't hesitate any longer. I had always planned and prepared for the divorce, so packing up my belongings wasn't an issue. I handed the keys to my house to my mother, who had come to the hospital room. If she could take out the belongings I had already packed during the weekdays, it would be all good. During that time, the police came and questioned me. Apparently, after receiving the report, the apartment management company checked the parking lot security cameras and saw footage of me being hit. With the evidence, they said it would lead to the arrest of my mother-in-law, which was a relief. By the time I was discharged from the hospital, my mother-in-law had been arrested by the police. I heard that when the police went to question her at my in-law's house, she tried to escape by pushing a police officer away. She was easily caught, and due to the risk of her fleeing, she was promptly placed into a patrol car. As for me, I didn't return home. Instead, I headed to my parents' house with the belongings my mother brought out. I had to quit my job, but I left in high spirits, planning to look for a new job in the city. Perhaps one reason for my positive mood was that when I went to my workplace to apologize and say goodbye, they kindly saw me off. A few more days passed. Through my lawyer, I demanded a divorce from my husband, but he vehemently refused. What's more, he actually showed up at my parents' house in Nebraska. At the front door, my parents were holding my husband back. My husband kept saying it was all a misunderstanding, but there's already evidence, and there's no way my mother-in-law's crimes would just vanish now. My husband kept saying family over and over again, which made my father lose his temper and angrily slam the front door shut. "You damn fool. Don't you ever dare call my daughter a family again. Get the hell out of here." Through the window, I could see my husband still trying to force open the door. Suddenly, my husband turned around. There stood some of the island's most intimidating and well-built uncles, staring at my husband with stern eyes. Seeing the looming figures approaching, my husband jumped and hurriedly ran towards the dock. He's probably waiting anxiously for the next ferry by now. Afterward, my husband and I managed to get our divorce finalized. Turns out, the hit-and-run investigation wasn't only about my mother-in-law who was driving, but my husband who was in the car with her. Unlike my mother-in-law who was arrested while trying to flee from the police, my husband didn't try to run and was cooperative during the investigation. So they went with a home investigation approach, which meant he wasn't detained by the police. However, since he left home, even if it was just a plane and a ferry ride away, he was considered a flight risk and was detained, just like my mother-in-law. It seemed like he wanted to show some sign of remorse by agreeing to my divorce request. But if we're going to get the divorce finalized, I honestly didn't care about his feelings anymore. The colleague who told me all this also informed me that my husband and my mother-in-law became the hottest gossip in the neighborhood. Phrases like the jerk who's more worried about his hit-and-run mom than his injured wife, or the lowest of the low, a mother-son hit-and-run duo, or like mother like son both got arrested, were the talk of the town. Since it became challenging to contact my husband and my mother-in-law, I had no choice but to rely on a lawyer. But I never wanted to see their faces again, so it's no big deal. Moving forward, there's going to be a lot of back and forth with my husband and my mother-in-law's insurance company, police investigations, and deciding whether or not to press charges. I just hope to settle everything quickly and never have to be in touch with them again. My mother-in-law hates me. I've been married to my husband for 4 years now, and we have a 6-month-old daughter named Luna. We live with my husband's mother, but it's more like living separately since we have our own house on the same property. Our privacy was relatively well maintained, or at least it should have been. My mother-in-law often comes over to our place and complains about various things like, this house has a bad vibe, or the furniture in this house has no taste at all. I thought our life might change when Luna was born, but it didn't change at all. In fact, it feels like she's become even more hostile towards me and Luna. When Luna cries, my mother-in-law says, "What a noisy girl. She's really noisy. I don't like girls like this." My mother-in-law actually wanted a son who could inherit the family name. She doesn't want girls in this house. It would have been a little cuter if it were a boy. Every time I heard my mother-in-law say such things, I couldn't help but worry that Luna might do something. My mother-in-law hardly even looked at Luna's face. Of course, she never held her either. According to my mother-in-law, she says words that deny Luna's existence, such as, "A girl with your blood is just disgusting. I wonder why you gave birth to her. Oh, this child is gonna have a hard time being so ugly. It's all your fault." I couldn't stand her abusive words toward my daughter, not just me. So I lived a life shuttling between my mother's house and my own, suppressing my anger. My name is Emily. I worked as a section chief at the Tokyo headquarters of my uncle's company. I have a brother, and he is the president of the company. By chance, my brother also had a baby who was about the same age as Luna. Because of that, I got along well with my sister-in-law, and we often visited each other's homes and played together. Are you bringing Jennifer with you today too? Yes, if it is with Luna, Jennifer will be in a good mood too. While the child is being quiet, I might as well take this chance to vent to you again. Of course, feel free to tell me everything. I often talk to my sister-in-law about my mother-in-law, or rather I vented to her. I met my husband through my uncle's introduction. My husband was working as a salesperson at my uncle's company's Kentucky branch. He was very diligent, and my brother appreciated his work, which led to his transfer to the New York headquarters. My husband's family was in New York, so this move was also greatly welcomed by his mother. Let's take this opportunity to have a meal together as a couple. He is a good guy. My uncle suggested, and that's how my relationship with my husband started. My husband was an only child and the heir to the family. His mother doted on him, and even now she would eagerly welcome him home, hugging him and saying things like, "Welcome back, and I cooked your favorite beans," whenever he visited. Due to her intense love for her son, my mother-in-law deeply despised me and constantly spread rumors about me, accusing me of being a manipulative woman who had entrapped her son. Her mistreatment of me was relentless. I used to work when we got married, so I had a hectic life where every minute counted. When I got home, I would often flop down on the sofa thinking, I've made it through another day. Those moments were incredibly satisfying. However, my mother-in-law would occasionally enter our home uninvited, catching me off guard. Emily, what are you doing? She would scold. I would hurriedly jump up and apologize, saying I'm sorry. I had a tough day at work, and when I got home, I just let my guard down. I had no idea you were here. My mother-in-law would respond, your work isn't finished yet. Please clean the main house and prepare dinner. It's our son's birthday today, so be sure to buy a fruit set he likes. She had shifted all household responsibilities, including those in the main house, onto me. About a year later, I started feeling unwell quite often. My husband was concerned and told me, you should rest a bit. However, my mother-in-law didn't like that he was showing me kindness. During this time, I had been visiting the gynecologist due to my health issues, as I had a suspicion about what might be causing them. As it turned out, my suspicion was correct. I was overjoyed and immediately shared the news with my husband. Today, when I went to the obstetrician, they told me I'm pregnant. Our baby, I exclaimed. That's amazing. I'm so happy. I'm gonna be a father. My husband was overjoyed. Seeing the happiness on my husband's face made me feel full of joy too. Our baby was growing healthy, and my belly was getting bigger and bigger. Up we go. I even found myself giving a little cheer when getting up from a chair. My large belly was a sign of our lively child. I continued working until the very last moment, and then I decided to take maternity and parental leave. Fortunately, my company had a supportive environment for this, and my colleagues sent me off with a big bouquet and cute baby clothes. Baby clothes already? You're jumping the gun, but thank you, everyone. I'll be taking a break for a while, but I'll come back in good spirits, so please keep my seat warm. Of course, we'll be waiting for you. Everyone smiled as they bid me farewell. However, when I returned home carrying the bouquet, my mother-in-law was standing there with a stern expression. Emily, you're quitting your job from today, right? Actually, Mother, I'm not quitting. I'm taking maternity and parental leave. I'll be back after my vacation. You're just being careless again. Well, fine. Make sure to do the housework properly during your break. With that big belly of yours, it's bound to be noisy having your child around. My mother-in-law was not pleased with my pregnancy. She found it distasteful that her son had fathered a child with another woman. And the fact that it was a girl added to her discontent. This child wouldn't be an heir, and to her, it was just an inconvenience. Despite all this, our daughter was born healthy and strong. My husband was moved to tears, and I felt an overwhelming sense of joy and excitement, knowing that something more precious than my own life had come into this world. Hey, what should we name her? Yeah, I've been giving it a lot of thought. How about Luna? Hoping she'll grow up to be as beautiful as the moon. Luna, that's a lovely name. Luna, you have Mommy and Daddy here. During my hospital stay, my husband made time to come and hold Luna immediately. It was truly a happy family time. Looking back, those 3 days in the hospital might have been the happiest moments of my life. When we returned home, my mother-in-law was there. I was immediately brought back to reality. Upon seeing Luna's face, my mother-in-law remarked, "She's such a beautiful child. She looks just like her father. I wonder if this child is really his. Are you deceiving him and having children with someone else?" She said such cruel things. My husband, who was present, got angry and said, "What are you saying, Mom?" My mother-in-law sulked and left the room. I think that was the only time my mother-in-law actually looked at Luna's face, both before and after this incident. Afterwards, she stopped even bothering to look at Luna's face. Even after I was discharged from the hospital, I was still made to do the housework in the main house. I set up a cool bedroom for Luna to sleep in, but if I took my eyes off her for a moment, my mother-in-law would be there, asking, "What are you doing?" There was gauze on Luna's face. I rushed over in surprise and removed the gauze. "Why would you put gauze on the face of a newborn like this?" I asked. "She could suffocate." My mother-in-law replied, "Oh, it's just a developmental test. Since she's your child, I thought maybe she's a bit slow in her development, so I decided to experiment. She can't even remove the gauze by herself yet. She really is slow, such a silly child." That's obvious, isn't it? She's only just been born. What if something happened? Well, that would be her fate, wouldn't it? My mother-in-law laughed and walked away. My mother-in-law's mistreatment of Luna was terrible. She would leave Luna lying on her stomach, even though Luna couldn't turn over properly yet. And she would intentionally place small objects around Luna, who had just started putting things in her mouth. However, my mother-in-law showed no remorse whatsoever. Actually, wouldn't it be easier for you to get a divorce if this child wasn't around? She asked. What are you talking about? I replied, I have no intention of divorcing. My mother-in-law then said, well then hurry up and have a boy. A boy who looks like our son, unlike this ugly one. After all, this ugly one probably isn't our son's child anyway. I was reaching my boiling point. I could endure the mistreatment directed at me, but to subject innocent Luna to such treatment was unacceptable. How many times do I have to tell you? I said, this child is mine and my husband's. If you can't trust me, then go ahead and do a DNA test or whatever you want. But don't harm this child. It's cowardly and despicable to lay a hand on a defenseless baby who can't even resist yet. This is your grandchild. My mother-in-law replied, I don't consider her my grandchild. She's just a noisy child, just like you. Our son was never a crybaby when he was little. If she were our son's child, she wouldn't be crying all the time. There was no point in arguing any further. I needed to create an environment where my mother-in-law and Luna couldn't interact physically. I couldn't physically interact with Luna to avoid any danger. With that in mind, I rarely brought her to the main house. And when I had no choice but to bring her, I carried her on my back to ensure she was never separated from me. Luna was about to turn 1 year old. I also wanted to return to work, so I had been making arrangements to enroll her in daycare. Today was the child daycare day. Luna had been at daycare since the morning. It was the first time in a while that I had been separated from my own child. I wonder what it is, but it feels incredibly lonely. It's as if a gaping hole has opened up inside me. As if to distract myself from that loneliness, I focused on housework during that time, trying to finish cleaning and laundry in the main house. I can't see my mother-in-law anywhere. Did she go somewhere? Well, if she's out, it means I won't be subjected to her harassment, so my stress might be reduced. After finishing the chores in the main house, I picked up Luna from daycare and brought her home. Despite it being her first day at daycare, she seemed to be spending it with a smile. The daycare staff assured me that Luna will be just fine and that I can enroll her in daycare anytime. I felt relieved. Luna must have been somewhat tired as well. Right after returning from daycare, she quickly fell asleep with a gentle snore. I returned home and laid Luna down in the cool, air-conditioned bedroom. Just then, my mother-in-law, who was covered in sweat, came back. You went out, didn't you? I asked. Yes, she replied. Did you finish cleaning and laundry? I asked. Yes, I finished, she said. The highest temperature for today is supposed to go over 104 degrees Fahrenheit, isn't it? I asked. Yes, it's quite hot lately and air conditioning is essential, she replied. I've also cooled down the main house, so it should be fine. I wondered how hot it gets inside a coin locker on such a scorching day. Suddenly, my mother-in-law brought up such a topic. I didn't understand what she meant, but I responded, well, since there's no airflow, it might feel close to 122 degrees Fahrenheit, don't you think? It must be sweltering, my mother-in-law chuckled. I felt an inexplicable fear from her attitude. Then she uttered something horrifying. Luna was crying so loudly, terribly noisy, so I put her in a coin locker at the station. Isn't she as irritating as that? You can hear everything, even from the main house. It could become a nuisance to the neighbors, so I thought she needed to be punished. What? You put Luna in there? I exclaimed. She must be quite hot by now, don't you think? It's all because she's your child. Such a poor thing. I hope she's not dead already. I think I mentioned this before, but Luna started daycare today and she just came back. She's fast asleep in the bedroom. My mother-in-law was taken aback, and she rushed into the bedroom. There, she found the sight of a baby sleeping soundly in the cool room. Her once amused face began to stiffen. Wait a moment. Then who is that child? Huh? My mother-in-law started to panic. Above all, I understood that my mother-in-law's words about putting a baby in a coin locker on such a hot day were true. I had to hurry to help, so I rushed out of the house. My mother-in-law, in a state of shock, followed me. This was a serious incident that would have a significant impact on my mother-in-law's future life. She quickly arrived at the coin locker. My mother-in-law, with trembling hands, unlocked the door, and there was indeed a baby inside. She was drenched in sweat and might be suffering from dehydration. I felt an urgent need to take the child to the hospital. What? She's alive. I worried for nothing. I thought that ugly child of yours would be gone, and you two would get divorced. I picked up the baby immediately to check her breathing. She was breathing, but her heart seemed to be beating faster than usual. Please don't say anything unnecessary and call an ambulance right away. However, there was no response. It seemed that my mother-in-law had fled. She must have thought that staying here any longer would lead to trouble. I felt genuine hatred for my mother-in-law, who had attempted to kill Luna. And I was determined never to forgive her for what she had done to an innocent baby. Before long, the baby was taken by ambulance, received prompt medical attention, and recovered her health. She was on the brink of dehydration. Babies are susceptible to dehydration, so please be extra careful with her, the nurse informed me. When the nurse asked me if the baby had a health record, I realized, oh, that's true. I'll contact the mother, so I made a call to the baby's mom. Meanwhile, the baby was peacefully sleeping in the bed. I couldn't help but wonder if this baby was indeed Luna. Just the thought sent shivers down my spine. How could someone do something so terrible? My anger towards my mother-in-law resurfaced, simmering beneath the surface. Upon returning home, I found the baby's mother waiting. Jennifer? She hugged her child, calling her, and broke down in tears as if her knees had given way. I apologized. I'm so sorry. I let my guard down for a moment. No, it's okay. I left Jennifer with you without even asking for your schedule. I feel responsible. I feel responsible too. Please, Emily, lift your head. You've done nothing wrong. As I raised my head, I saw that the baby's mother was my sister-in-law. She also had a baby of similar age. She explained that as the wife of the CEO, she often had to attend events as a representative, and that day she had left Jennifer with me just for a few hours. My sister-in-law and I had been very close, often exchanging advice and sharing our parenting concerns. Jennifer had grown fond of me as well. That day happened to be Jennifer's first day at daycare, so I gladly agreed to look after her. Since nothing serious happened, let's stop apologizing, my sister-in-law comforted me. I tried to find my mother-in-law, but she was nowhere to be found. I tried contacting several acquaintances, including the main house, but it seemed like she was nowhere to be found. It seemed like she had no intention of responding to my messages. I asked my husband to send a message to his mother saying, I want to divorce Emily. Please come back. I need to talk to you. Of course, I had no intention of actually divorcing him. It was all a ruse to get my mother-in-law to return. My mother-in-law had fallen right into the trap. 2 days later, she came back home. I greeted her saying, welcome back. Oh, you're still here? I thought you were divorcing my son, she replied. Oh, that was just a lie. What? She tried to leave again, but I stopped her. I have good news. The baby is doing well. Oh, really? I didn't know. Do you know who that baby is? She's my brother's daughter. My mother-in-law paused for a moment and then retorted, so what? In a defiant manner. My brother is the representative director of our company, you know? Your beloved son's company. I emphasized. My mother-in-law's face turned pale. Where's my son? Well, I think he's probably at my brother's place, apologizing. She imagined her precious son apologizing and her anger exploded. He has nothing to do with that child. She shouted, you closed the door to your son's career. My brother held your son in high regard. He was considering a promotion to section chief by the end of this year. But now, due to this incident, my brother is furious. He can't give a job to someone who doesn't even understand his own mother. No, I thought that baby was Luna. My mother-in-law took a few steps back. Mother-in-law, you hardly ever look directly at Luna's face. It's understandable that you could mistake her for another baby. My sister-in-law wasn't upset about it, but my brother is very angry. What will happen to my son? Even in this situation, my mother-in-law's mind was preoccupied with her son. He'll probably be fired. I then asked my mother-in-law, "Where have you been all this time?" She replied, "I stayed with my friends until things cooled down." "But that baby is fine now, right?" She just sweated a little. I put her in the locker to help her metabolism. Maybe she'll become a healthy child because of it? My mother-in-law continued to justify her actions, saying, "I can't believe they would fire my son over something like that. I'm rejecting that company. It's a place where my son's talents can't shine." A man came out of the adjacent room. It was my brother. He asked, "Is that so you rejected it?" My mother-in-law replied, "Emily, you deceived me." She completely changed her attitude from earlier and lowered her head to my older brother, saying, "Oh, my son has always been taken care of by you." When my mother-in-law started to apologize, my brother interjected, "I've heard everything." My mother-in-law was trying to justify herself, saying it's not like that. I really thought it was Luna, and it was just a mistake. I think it's something you shouldn't do to any baby. She kept apologizing. "You're not apologizing to my daughter, you're just apologizing for my title." "I've heard that you've treated my sister pretty badly too. What's your problem?" My mother-in-law became flustered and looked down, saying, "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. So please spare my son from being fired. He's working hard, but his wife didn't understand." She must have been glaring at me. My older brother didn't let that slide, saying, "My sister is a very understanding person. She's also a talented manager at work." It seemed like something inside my mother-in-law snapped. She pointed at me and said, "Seriously, it's all because of you. I've never really liked this marriage from the start. Why did my son marry someone like you? He was deceived by this woman. And what's this about leaving a baby in the locker? Do you have any evidence to back up such a claim? What kind of person are you?" She continued, still saying such things. "The locker I happened to open just happened to have a baby inside. And that baby just happened to be your brother's child. That's all there is to it, isn't it? My son has absolutely nothing to do with this. Bringing him into this situation is just as bad on your part as it is on your brother's." It's quite an unreasonable argument, but my mother-in-law's face turned beet red, and she spoke rapidly like a machine gun. Putting a baby in the coin locker was unacceptable. The incident was captured clearly on the security camera. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law's confidence vanished, and she surrendered completely. "The police will be arriving soon." The police? My mother-in-law never imagined that her actions would lead to a police investigation. She panicked. Why the police? Why, you may ask? Taking a child away without permission and leaving them behind are both serious crimes. You must face the consequences. Are you saying it's okay if I get arrested? Wait, where is my son? Where is he? My husband slowly emerged from the room. "Mom, I can no longer support you. It's just not right. It's terrible. I did it for your sake. In the end, I lost my position and trust at my company. What do you mean it was for my sake? If it truly was for my sake, you should have been able to love Luna, right? Both Emily and Luna are my family. You should never have done anything to harm my family, right? Mom, please give up and face your mistakes. Return to your old self." Just then, the police arrived and my mother-in-law was taken away while sobbing. Our home, after my mother-in-law was taken away, my husband cried uncontrollably, and my brother held his head in his hands. Despite all this, Luna and Jennifer were peacefully sleeping. "Big brother, I'm truly sorry for this whole ordeal. Even though it was my mother-in-law who did it, I'm deeply sorry that Jennifer, who had nothing to do with it, had to go through such a scary experience." My brother placed his hand on my shoulder. "It's okay now. Jennifer is fine, and my wife isn't blaming you at all. What about my husband's job? We can't promote him to manager, but we won't fire him. He's a capable and excellent employee. Another opportunity for promotion will come." My husband and I apologized to my brother, but Luna and Jennifer really look like twins, don't they? Both Luna and Jennifer, sleeping peacefully, were in the same position and facing the same direction. They were incredibly cute. I gently stroked both of their heads. I'm sorry for putting you through so much pain. How about using this as an opportunity to move, Emily? But I can't bear to stay with my mom any longer. Even if it's a small apartment, let's move out. I was grateful that my husband had made that decision. Thank you. Tears welled up in my eyes out of happiness. We moved to a small apartment and decided to start our lives over from scratch. Luna happily went to daycare. And my husband and I worked hard every day, dreaming of having our own home. My mother-in-law was released from custody. After being released from custody, she seemed to have returned to that house, but we never heard from her again. It appears that she was thoroughly questioned by the police. We started a new life as a family of 3, or rather 4. I was pregnant with a new life inside me. Interestingly, my brother's wife was also expecting, and our due dates were the same. We laughed about how strange things can happen in life. I've been silent, but actually, I'm pregnant with Kevin's child. Will you take responsibility? The day after the wedding, my family had all gathered at the house I now shared with my husband, Kevin. As I went to the front door in surprise, my sister stared at me with sharp eyes and said, "What does this mean?" "You're fortunate enough not to have any children yet. Let's make Kevin take responsibility. You should break up with him and let Kevin marry Kate. Summer, give Kevin up to her." My father said with a stern face, "Sis, you said it's Kevin's child, but what do you mean? How many months pregnant are you?" I couldn't help but ask my sister. "I'm 3 months pregnant. If Kevin doesn't take responsibility, this child will end up without a father. That's just pitiful, isn't it?" My sister said with a malicious grin on her face. However, after hearing what I said next, my sister started trembling. "My name is Summer. I'm a 26-year-old housewife. Today I want to talk about how I stood up to my own sister, who tried to steal my husband. This happened a few years ago when I was still single. There was a middle school reunion held after a long time, and I reunited with Kevin, my childhood friend who used to live nearby. Just after I started elementary school, my sister Kate, who is 4 years older than me, Kevin, and I used to play together quite a bit. But gradually, he started to drift away as he felt embarrassed to be playing with girls, a feeling quite typical for boys at that age. After entering middle school, we became even more distant as Kevin's family moved away. So when he spoke to me at the reunion, I was really nervous. However, there's a great ally when you become an adult. Yes, that's alcohol. After loosening up with a few drinks, Kevin, who also became more talkative with alcohol, and I found ourselves having a great time, almost as if we had never been apart. Just the 2 of us went to a second and then a third gathering, and just when we were about to call it a night, Kevin opened up. "When we were kids, I had a crush on you, but somehow I feel like I can still be in love with you even now as adults." I chuckled and replied, "What's that about?" But then casually I added, "So wanna go out?" And just like that, our relationship began. Later on, a sober Kevin was holding his head, saying, No, I got way too carried away." Oh, how embarrassing. Who said those lines? It was me, and needless to say, I couldn't help but grin as I watched him. Everything went smoothly from there, and we decided to get married. We visited each other's parents' homes and finished our greetings, planning to get married and start living together in 6 months. We were childhood friends, so our parents already knew each other. There seemed to be no problems, and we were confident we'd get the okay. But as it turns out, there was a problem at my house. It happened when Kevin came over to greet my family and we were having a meal together. I'm home with a tired voice. My sister Kate came back from work. As soon as she saw Kevin sitting at the table with my family, her surprised face suddenly brightened up, and she looked overjoyed. "Is that Kevin? Wow, it's been so long. Why are you at our house?" Kevin looked a bit embarrassed and then glanced at me. "You see, we've been dating for about half a year now, and we've decided to get married. He came over today to tell everyone about it. I thought it was my place to explain, so I spoke on behalf of Kevin. At that moment, my sister's face clearly showed dissatisfaction. Hey, I see. I'm tired, so I'm gonna bed. Bye." After giving me a quick glance, my sister went to her room and slammed the door shut. Geez, that's a terrible attitude. Did I make her uncomfortable? Worried, I looked at Kevin, but he smiled back at me as if to say, "Don't worry about it," which made me feel relieved. My sister Kate is highly educated and very beautiful, so she's been popular since she was young. However, while she appears nice on the outside, she actually has a pretty bad personality. Today, she must have had some dissatisfaction with my marriage or living together with Kevin. But even our parents didn't show any problems, so why on earth is my sister so dissatisfied? I couldn't understand her feelings, and even after Kevin left, I was still pondering whether or not I should ask her directly. That night, as I was about to head to the bathroom, I suddenly bumped into my sister in the hallway. I was at a loss for words, and my sister glared at me as if she was a demon. "I never thought that you would marry Kevin. I've liked him since a long time ago. I will never forgive you for this." With a huff, she turned on her heel and quickly left. I was left dumbfounded by her unexpected confession. Wait, what? Does my sister like Kevin? This could potentially become a messy situation. I thought to myself as I held my head in my hands. After a sleepless night of tossing and turning, I finally came to a decision. Even if my sister does have feelings for my fiancé, is it really a problem? After all, Kevin and I are already engaged to be married. If Kevin had feelings for my sister, that would be a different story. But that is not the case. Plus, if my sister has had feelings for him since we were kids, she should have confessed them a long time ago. It was her mistake for not expressing her feelings, and it is unfair for me to be blamed for it. I can imagine that my sister will now be colder towards me, but I have decided to remain optimistic and take it with a large heart, which is one of my strong points. However, I'm still unsure if I should tell Kevin about this situation. It would mean revealing my sister's feelings to him. But if I don't tell him, he will feel uncomfortable every time he visits my house without knowing why. Considering he is also involved, I believe it is only right to explain everything to him. When I told Kevin everything, he looked worried and said, "I see. Summer, if anything happens, make sure to tell me, okay? Though I'm not sure how much help I can be. This is a sister issue. Maybe I should use you as a shield if she ever tries to attack me." I replied, "Hey, don't joke about that." He laughed and said, "Ha, I'm just kidding." And so we decided not to dwell on it too much. Neither of us had any intention of changing our decision to get married, and it was not an issue that could be resolved by convincing my sister and gaining her understanding. So we chose to leave it as it is. As expected, my sister's treatment towards me became harsher from that point on. On the first day when I went to take a bath after her, she had drained the bathtub. It wasn't a big deal, but it did give me a sense of relief, thinking, my sister is still so immature to do such petty things. However, I had a hard time when she hid my makeup and wallet, especially before going to work. I was shaking at the thought of being late as I frantically searched the whole house. Thanks to that, I barely made it to work on time twice in a week, and my boss looked at me coldly, wondering if I was slacking off with my wedding just around the corner. At first, my parents were unaware of my sister's pranks, but they started to notice something was wrong when she began hiding valuables. My mom scolded her, saying, "Why are you acting like a child at your age?" It seemed like my sister didn't take it too seriously, responding with something like, "You're so annoying." The real problem was my dad. Ever since my sister was born and my mom fell ill, he has taken on more responsibilities and has been under a lot of stress. As a result, he had to take care of a newborn by himself for a few weeks. He has always favored my sister. If I had to recall a time when I felt left out, it was when we were kids and went to a department store to buy clothes. My sister has always been pretty, so my dad would say, "Everything looks good on you," and let her choose whatever she wanted. But when I said, "I want that dress," he would reply, "You should settle for this one and pick out something random for me." My mom would listen to my opinion, so I didn't have any hard feelings about my dad's favoritism. However, if my mom wasn't like that, I probably would have developed a huge inferiority complex. Even back then, my friends would say things like, "Your sister is the favorite," so I was aware of the favoritism. But this time, my dad was blatantly on my sister's side. She seemed to be telling him that her younger sister stole her boyfriend, and in my dad's eyes, Kevin was the villain who played with the feelings of both sisters. He thought, Your sister's getting married to this guy. But what about the sister who got dumped? My mom was skeptical about my dad's view, saying, I can't imagine Kevin doing such a thing. She listened to my side of the story and said, that's not how it is. She was fair and didn't take sides, listening to both me and my sister. But my father said, I can't help but feel sorry for your abandoned sister. Now she's being played with. I won't allow my beloved daughters to be manipulated like this. Wake up. He said this as if I had been brainwashed by Kevin. No matter what I said, he wouldn't listen to me. It was becoming a big problem that he was starting to oppose our marriage. But I decided to push through anyway. I left home earlier than planned and moved in with Kevin quickly. If I hadn't been at my parents' house to begin with, I wouldn't have been harassed by my sister. As it turned out, that decision was the right one, and my life living with Kevin went on peacefully. As days went by, my mother said, maybe Summer is right. She is an adult now, so she should do as she pleases. My father still seemed unsatisfied, but he didn't say anything directly to me. He probably thought that even if Kevin and I broke up, it would be pitiful for me, and he couldn't imagine Kevin going back to my sister. He must have thought this was the best way to settle things. I didn't hear anything from my problematic sister, and I thought everything was finally over. But on the day of the wedding, my sister still didn't show up, and my father said it's not too late. Why don't you think it over one more time? He urged me to reconsider the marriage. Not everyone may have been truly happy for us, but under the watchful eyes of my parents, we got married. The next day, the doorbell rang loudly from early in the morning. What? What's going on? Kevin and I jumped out of bed. Rushing to the monitor, I saw that my whole family had come to visit. Dad, Mom, sister, what on earth is going on? As I went to the door in surprise, my sister glared at me with sharp eyes. You know, I kept quiet about this, but actually I'm pregnant with Kevin's baby. Will he take responsibility? What is this about? You're lucky you don't have kids yet. Maybe you should break up with him and let Kevin and Kate get married. My mother, listening to my sister and father, asked me in a confused tone, what on earth is going on? At that moment, Kevin, still half asleep, followed me to the entrance. Oh, what? Madeni? What? He suddenly woke up completely, looked at me in surprise, and vigorously shook his head and hands as if to say, no, that's not true. I didn't do anything. I believed in Kevin's innocence, but I couldn't help but burst into laughter at his reaction. Sister, you said it's Kevin's baby, but what do you mean? How many months pregnant are you? 3 months. If Kevin doesn't take responsibility, this baby will grow up fatherless. That would be pitiful, right? I was taken aback by my sister's words and exchanged glances with Kevin. That's funny. We burst into laughter. My parents stood there confused. My sister panicked and said, what's so funny? What are you laughing at? No, it's just, oh, so it was 3 months ago? Tears came out of my eyes from laughing too much. Kate, we had a great time last time, didn't we? Oh yes. My sister was momentarily flustered by Kevin's sudden question. My parents looked at Kevin with disgust, not understanding what he meant. By the way, Kate, do you remember what I whispered to you 3 months ago? My sister looked confused. 3 months ago, I said something really cheesy to you. I can't remember exactly what it was, but do you remember? Kevin posed as if he was trying hard to recall, but in a somewhat exaggerated manner. What? What are you talking about, Kevin? I confessed my love to you in a really cheesy way. Don't you remember? Kevin said this embarrassing line with a serious face, not minding my sister's puzzled look. Well, never mind. Here's the next question. I actually have a really embarrassing tattoo on my back. Do you remember what it was? No, huh? My sister was confused by Kevin's strange question. My mother, watching their interaction, started to feel something was off about their relationship. They didn't seem like they had been intimate, she must have thought. And she was right. There's no way they could have such a conversation if they really had spent a night together. Not to mention in front of their parents. This kind of conversation itself proved that nothing had actually happened between them. My sister, now desperate, answered, is it a character from an anime or something? Too bad, I don't have any tattoos, you know? Suddenly, the father, who had been silently listening to the exchange between Kevin and his sister, burst in. Enough is enough, Kevin. I tried to stop my father, who looked like he was about to grab Kevin at any moment. Wait, listen to me. Sister, you said you were 3 months pregnant, didn't you? Then, considering when you would have conceived, it's impossible that the child is Kevin's. What? My mother was the one to catch on to my words. Is it okay if I say it? I glanced at Kevin, and he reluctantly nodded, making a face as if he was in deep trouble. Wait, can I say it? It's fine, but can you say it? Yeah, with a show of bravado as if to say I'll do it, he opened his mouth. Around that time, I, got scratched on a very delicate part by our cat at home. At this moment, the whole family's mouths dropped open in shock. Come on, don't lie. There's no way you could get scratched there. My father snapped back to reality and scolded him, while my mother held her stomach, laughing loudly. No, embarrassing as it is to admit, it's true. It was hot, so I thought I'd cool off a bit. I thought I was out of sight and relaxed in the buff when our cat approached me with a meow and scratched me. Kevin's face, even his ears, turned beet red. I thought to myself that I shouldn't laugh to save him from further embarrassment caused by my family, but I couldn't hold it in any longer and burst out laughing. There's no way there could be a man that embarrassed. No, there actually is a man that embarrassed right in front of you, Dad-in-law. Kevin retorted with a face as red as a tomato, his voice barely audible. But still, that doesn't prove that the child in my stomach isn't Kevin's. My sister, who'd been losing ground, joined back in as if she had regained her breath. No, Kate, think about it. Those sharp cat claws, right? And on such a delicate spot? You're a man, you understand, right? The pain of getting hurt in such a vital place. Kate fell silent in front of Kevin's serious face. Perhaps imagining the situation from his explanation, her father grimaced and softly held his groin. Though he hastily put on a grim expression, it was visibly clear that he was gradually starting to believe Kevin's words. It's a really important part for a man. You know, it was tough. We even called an ambulance. Really, I was more embarrassed being there with him. I couldn't help but interject into Kevin's story. It was a tough situation. I even had a fever and had to be hospitalized for a while. Honestly, in that condition, I doubt I could even conceive. If you want, you can check with the hospital where he was admitted, he said, his face turning red with embarrassment. At that, my mother burst into laughter. By the way, Kevin, when you used to play at our house a long time ago, you often used to strip naked in the bathroom, didn't you? My mother, laughing heartily, dug up the old story. What? What are you talking about? He was blushing furiously as he retorted to my mother. From the looks of it, my mother had completely trusted him by now. I felt relieved. Well, yeah, I can sympathize with you as a man. I doubt anyone would bother telling such an embarrassing lie. There's no need to confirm it with the hospital. At this moment, my father looked at Kevin with kind, almost saintly eyes, as if respecting his remaining pride. Ironically, given where the injury was, it seemed understanding came quicker from another man. Meanwhile, my sister stood there stunned. I turned to her and said, "Hey, sis. Even if we're fed such a ridiculous lie, neither Kevin nor I are gonna get a divorce. If anything, I think you're just making yourself more miserable." At that moment, my sister's eyes widened in anger. Shut up, shut up, shut up! What the hell? I'm more popular than you are. I can't take this. I don't like Kevin if he's going to take Summer's side. Emotional, she tried to grab me, but Kevin forcefully shook off her hand. Kate, I don't care if you don't like me. I love Summer, so it doesn't matter. I think of you as an important childhood friend and sister, but I have never and will never see you romantically. If you continue to lie like this, I will stand against you with all my might. I am Summer's husband, and I will protect her with everything I have. Kevin told my sister this with a serious expression on his face. Watching this, my father said, Kate, if you really are pregnant, could you show us any medical records or anything? Hearing this, it became clear that my parents were questioning the validity of my sister's claims. I had believed my sister's pregnancy claim based solely on her word without any proof. My mother also urged my sister, if it's a lie, you should apologize to them. My sister bit her lip and trembled. Forget it. If no one is going to take my side, then I don't want to hear it later that you regret it. With that, she left the room in tears. My father moved as if to follow her, but my mother stopped him, saying, "Let her go. She needs to cool down." 2 weeks later, it seemed like my mother had forcibly taken my sister to the gynecologist, but as expected, there was no sign of pregnancy. My parents apologized to Kevin, saying, "We're sorry for causing trouble and suspecting you without reason. We should have trusted Kevin, whom we have known since childhood. Please continue to take care of Summer." And to me they said, "We're really sorry for making you feel bad." Honestly, I don't think my parents, specifically my father, were in the wrong regarding this commotion. Everyone makes a mistake or two. This time it just happened to be my parents. More precisely, my father, affected by his favoritism towards my sister. However, considering the great debt of gratitude I owe them for raising me so well, I decided to forgive them. As for my problematic sister, after her lie about being pregnant was exposed, she seemed suddenly embarrassed and said, "I give up on this family," and left home in a huff. In the past, my father, being soft on my sister, would have gone after her immediately. But this time he said, "Maybe it's better for Kate not to come back for a while. It'll give her time to cool off." My mother stated, after pulling something like that, she can't just chalk it up to a whim. If she can't come back and sincerely apologize, she's not welcome in this house. I can't imagine my fiercely angry sister ever sincerely apologizing to us, and I think my mother feels the same way. In other words, this is effectively a disownment. 5 years have passed since then. My sister did come back and apologize to my parents and me once, but she ended up being truly disowned and kicked out of the house. At first, my sister Kate seemed remorseful, but during Thanksgiving holidays that year, she drank heavily and caused trouble. She came to our parents' house with me and sneaked into Kevin's bed, who was already asleep, saying, "Hey, aren't you getting tired of Summer by now?" Groggy Kevin thought a burglar had entered and screamed, "What?" though loud enough to potentially anger the neighbors. With his scream, not only I, but also our parents woke up and discovered what was happening. Being quite drunk, Kate started shouting and thrashing around, saying, "I mean, you always seem so close to Summer, and it made me jealous. You could pay a little attention to me too." I was furious and had enough, and my parents, with faces like avenging demons I had never seen before, disowned Kate. Especially my father, who should have doted on my sister, openly displayed disgust and said, "I don't remember raising a child like this." I will never forget that moment. When she sobered up, Kate apologized repeatedly, but my father sternly rejected her, saying, "Actions when drunk reveal your true feelings. We can't trust anything you say anymore." With that, she tearfully left our family home. Meanwhile, soon after the chaotic holidays, I discovered I was pregnant with our first child. Being at the age where he loves to play, if you take your eyes off him for a moment, he'll cover an entire wall with crayon drawings. And even if you clean it up, he'll just start drawing again. But we can't help but adore him, so no matter what mischief he gets up to, both Kevin and I end up forgiving him. Thanks to that, we're living happily every day. My parents are delighted with their first grandchild, visiting us frequently to help out with childcare. Kevin is cooperative with parenting, always responding with a smile even when our son pulls his hair while being carried on his shoulders. Ours is a loud and lively household, far from quiet and calm, but right now I am utterly content and filled with happiness.